All right, ladies and gents, we are getting ready to get started with our webinar today. Listen, this is a pretty hot topic that we're covering today, one that we chat about in our masterminds, online, coffee chats. It's kind of a hot topic, mental health. And not always for the reasons that one would think. And so we are really excited to hear from the one and only Miss Shundria Riddick. She is a prolific speaker and a licensed professional counselor. So you should know you're getting some good stuff today. This is not just your girl down the street, right? This is someone who is very much the professional and the heartbeat of everything that has to do with this industry. She's had her master's degree in counseling. She's licensed in the state of Texas. She's helped parents. She's been growing her own business. I mean, she's doing all the things, virtual counseling, educational groups, life coaching. So if that's something that you need, you may want to hit her up after this. But she's here to speak to us today a little bit about managing mental health by letting go. And so we're going to encourage you to take notes, to kind of be plugged in for this. If you have questions, you can submit those in the Q&A, and we'll make sure that they get answered afterwards. So at this time, we're going to turn it right over to Mrs. Riddick.
Hi, everyone. It's so good to be here. Thank you to Erica for allowing me to be here. I'm so excited. I was so excited to hear that you guys are interested in mental health because so many things are changing. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a huge generational gap when it comes to how we deal with mental health and mental health issues and mental illness. So it is really, really great being here. So we can just jump right in because I have a lot to talk about. This is great. Just a little bit about myself. I am a licensed professional counselor in the state of Texas. I have been in mental health for about over 20 years experience. I date myself, but I'm gonna go ahead and tell you guys the truth that it has been over 20 years that I've been doing this. I'm considered primarily a trauma therapist. I do depression, anxiety. I deal with couples, Couples are tough, but I do deal with couples. My private practice right now is primarily virtual. So I do a lot of online throughout the day, but in that online, I actually do groups. I have groups on the weekends and educational groups, life coaching. I have life coaching clients all over the United States. The furthest I've had one was in South Africa and Canada, all over the world. So I do have clients that I see doing some life coaching. But today we are talking about managing mental health. So the interaction is important. So feel free to type your questions in the chat box so we can get to those at the end of the presentation. This is going to be great. So don't wait until the end to remember your question. Just go ahead and put it in so you won't forget them, because I would love to make sure that you are getting taken care of. So let's talk about what we're going to do today. So got the introduction out of the way. We're going to look at mental health by generations, different attitudes, the impact of social media, common mental health issues, and how we bridge that gap and get a better understanding of each other so we can all kind of work together as it relates to mental health. Let's look at generations. So I want you to kind of figure out which generation you're in. Most of you guys know, but so let's look at mental health by generations. Boomers, born 1946 to 64. Now, we look at the generation boomers because mental health has changed so much over the last 70 years. It used to be hospital asylums, and they moved it to the community, more talk therapy, things like that. But those boomers, man, they had a hard time through wars, economic turmoil, and just major things happening, a lot of trauma going on in their society. So they had no information as it relates to mental health, none. So if you had PTSD, postpartum depression, it was considered pretty much the same thing. You were not fit for society. So boomers put everybody away. We're going to lock you up, put you away because you're not fit for society. And there was really no room to understand. So boomers actually, they're wired differently. So boomers really keep things to themselves. They try to work out things within themselves. Over the 20 years that I've been doing counseling, I may have had 3 boomers. Seriously, 3 boomers have come to counseling. So that just tells you how boomers, their view of mental health, keep it to ourselves. This is my business. I'm going to hold it in. I'm not going to discuss it with anybody outside of me. Generation X is a little different. That's my generation, 65 to 80. Generation X, we were called the lost generation. The lost generation, we didn't even have a name until 1991. Generation X was kind of thrown into the mix of adulthood pretty early, taught to be self-reliant, not a lot of supervision. You go outside and play, don't come back in until the street lights come on, figure it out, deal with it on your own. Not really taught about mental health, but at the end of that time, right during probably teenage years, college years, technology came out. But technology was very useful as far as research. It wasn't a social platform during that time. So technology had just kind of come out. I remember taking computer classes in high school, just kind of learning how to work on a computer. I'm not going to tell you what program we learned on, but but that's during the time that we kind of were introduced to the computers. So Generation X didn't really have a lot of mental health, but because of the computer generation coming in, got a little bit less stigma as it relates to mental health. So a lot more Generation X do access mental health. In comes the millennials. So millennials come in during this time where they're the first to really use the technology and really the first to have social media. So really access to different ideas, different people, different ways of living. Millennials are known as the anxious generation because they first were introduced to other people and they have this kind of comparison kind of started with them. I don't have enough. Looks like I need to do things better. I got to be a little bit more successful. What I'm doing is not enough. I don't look the part. Things like that started because the comparison came by social media. The next population is Generation Z, 1997 through 2012. Generation Z, that's all they know is technology. They were born into a world full of technology. None of their lifetime has been without social media, without computers, without that platform. So the thing of comparison, I'm not enough. Generation Z, very comfortable in their mental health. Everything is online, everything is on display. They talk about their mental health without regard. They're not embarrassed about the things that they go through because it is a post, it is a story, it is a TikTok. So they invite people into their world. So the stigma that the boomers in a Generation X have as far as privacy and personal matters being kept within family, be kept with each other, they don't have that. There's no regard. So even though boomers and Generation X and some millennials, because of the embarrassment of the anxiety, they may not share as readily, Generation Z, they don't have that. So that difference between the generation can cause some kind of conflict as far as what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. Usually that's a huge thing between boomers and Generation Z and millennials. So I see that a lot in my practice where a Gen Z come in, they just lay out everything. They don't care. They tell me about all their problems. And I'm like, okay, thank you for the information. Okay, thanks. A lot more, but there's a lot of less stigma associated with mental health with Generation Z. So they're far more willing to get help. But they also have a lot more issues. They are the generation that's gone through school shootings, 9/11, different policy changes, World War, a whole global pandemic. And so they can access different people, different populations at the push of a button. Immediately, they can access a lot of things going on around the world. So that whole pressure of anxiety and things are on them, different than boomers, Generation X and millennials. Generation X we didn't know what was going on around the world unless we watched the news at 10 o'clock at night. And usually Generation X were supposed to be asleep by 10 o'clock at night. So we didn't really know what was going on outside of the conversations with parents. But Generation Z, full access to everything, anything that happens around the world, they have access to, which increases that sense of anxiety. And then we have the new babies coming out, Generation Alpha 2012, and they're kind of along the same lines as Gen Z. Not a lot of privacy, not a lot of inhibitions as it relates to how they feel. Social media impact, and this is something that I want you to really pay close attention to. If we look at the statistics, 58% of Americans say that social media has a negative impact on their mental health. But I think it's something like 20% of the people aren't on social media. So that many people have a negative impact of social media, but we're all on it. We're constantly engaged with social media throughout the day. 64% experience anxiety. Then there's depression and a dissatisfaction with life, body issues, fear of missing out. We all have that sense of belonging, that we all want to belong some kind of way in society. But through social media, we want to belong, but we're constantly bombarded with images telling us that we're not, that we're different, that we don't have enough, you're not successful enough. So it has a huge impact on our mental health. 71% impacts due to misinformation and disinformation. Anybody can post, and it looks so professional and so believable that a lot of us believe what we're seeing, and we don't have a way of filtering those things out from truth or not truth. So we're really impacted by that. Also, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok are the most harmful to our mental health. And those are the three that the majority of us consume. And I say consume because they call us users, and users consume. So we consume that daily, throughout our days. Now, I want you to kind of really think about how many times you picked up your phone, how many times even during while I've been talking, have you looked at your screen? Have you picked up and see who texts you or what notification that you received? That amount of engagement throughout the day bombards us, and then we are consumed by those thoughts and less thoughts about how we're doing our own self-talk, what we're feeling, what we're needing. I ask my clients every day, you're supposed to ask yourself several times a day, how do I feel and what do I need? And you can't ask yourself that if you're constantly being engaged on social media. So it's important that how do I feel? What do I need? It's something that we ask ourselves during the course of the day. So mental health, because we talk about it so much, we have these three terms that we hear all the time. We have depression, anxiety, and bipolar. All of these are diagnoses in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. I can't say that three times, very hard. But that's what we use to diagnose mental health disorders. A lot of us we don't have all of the criteria for major depression, but we have enough to say that we are depressed, or enough to say that we are anxious, or enough to say that we have some issues as far as extreme moods during the course of the day. And it could be triggered by life events, or anything that can trigger depression or anxiety. It can be triggered, but some of us have a lot more traits than others. But in order to have the disorder, you have to be diagnosed by a licensed therapist or doctor or clinical psychologist. But these are the common mental health issues that I run into every single day. So depression is more like things, I'm feeling sad, I'm having a hard day, I want to withdraw myself. Anxiety, sense of angst, rapid heart rates, difficulty breathing. I just don't know what I'm going to do. I can't rest. I can't sleep. Bipolar or extreme moods on both sides of depression and anxiety. So those are the three that I hear a lot. And I'm sure many of you have heard those terms mostly: depression, anxiety and bipolar. We hear those a lot, and sometimes they're misused because someone say that they're depressed doesn't mean that they are. They're anxious doesn't mean they have a diagnosis, or they say I'm feeling bipolar today doesn't mean that they have bipolar. They have to actually be diagnosed as such. Okay, so knowing that we have all the social media and the different aspects of mental health, this is without any kind of resource, just coming into work every day, just interacting. There's increase of burnout, absentee, people calling in work, poor performance, and a decreased retention. People leave, they work for a little bit, and then they skip out. Generation Z has no, a long time ago, I know Generation X and Boomers, you stayed at a job for 30 years. Millennials, Generation Z don't have that kind of commitment to work. So there has to be some kind of support, some kind of environment where they feel supported and heard, and that they stay in over a course of time, but they really don't have that 20 to 30 year kind of commitment to work. So how do we do that? How do we bridge the gap from all three of those? I mean, all four: Boomers, Generation X, Millennials, and Gen Zs. The babies, we don't have to worry about them yet, thank God, but those you don't have to agree on everything, but we just need to understand perspectives, right? So it's the understanding of perspectives that we need to strive to. We have a lot of disagreements when it comes to the approach of how we deal with mental illness and mental health. Because Boomers don't feel like it's anybody's business. They're like, don't tell anybody your business. Come to work, do your job, go home. Why do we have to know about everything in your house? Why do we have to know about anything with your family? I remember working, and I didn't know anything about my boss's family. I didn't know he was married or had kids. I didn't know. I was just going to work every day. He was a Boomer. He didn't talk about that. So there's just a difference in opinion about what needs to be said and how it needs to be said and what needs to be shared. But we don't have to agree. We just have to understand each other, understand that everybody has a different level of comfortability when it comes to what is shared and what's not. So that's when we have to look at individualism and professionalism. Generation Z has a very much individual. I am an individual. I am entitled to how I feel. You have to accommodate how I feel. Everybody in the room has to pay attention to and work around me as an individual. I am who I am. You accept me who I am. If you do not, go over there. You're outside. It's really easily offended if you don't accept how I am and what I say and how I live. That's very individualistic. And that's kind of how our society is now, kind of run by, this is how I feel, this is what I believe, take it or leave it. That's hard to do in a workplace because professionalism says you are an individual that impacts the work environment and leaves a mark with everybody. So professionalism is how we act in an environment that promotes the whole and the success of this business that we have going on, this goal that we're trying to get to. So individualism is okay. Professionalism is saying, hey, your individualism can impact the professionalism in the environment and impact how we get to our goal. So we can kind of combine the two. It doesn't have to be individual versus professionalism. It can be both. We can kind of have conversations around you as an individual, and you bring your individual self and all of your creativity and all of your hard work and all of your intellect to impact this environment so we can all be successful. And I think that's kind of the difference between Boomers, Generation X, is kind of like you're not an individual, you're at work. You are part of a whole. We all work on the same goal. And I think that language has changed throughout the years. So we just kind of have to get into this space where it can be both. We don't have to choose one or the other. So how do we approach, how do you approach mental health? But you can kind of put that into the chat and let me know, how do you approach mental health, right? What do you know about mental health? What do you think about how mental health is being dealt with these days, right? What did you learn about mental health? Are you afraid of mental health? A lot of us, when we hear mental health, we kind of shy away from that term. But are you intimidated by mental health and depression and anxiety and diagnosis and all of that? The truth of the matter when it comes to mental health, all of us deal with some sense of mental health at some part of our day and in a lifetime. So you will have times where you're depressed, you will have times where you're anxious, you will have times where you have some extreme responses to things throughout our childhood. When you deal with what you're dealing with, I do want you to know that a lot of times when you're responding to what's in front of you, you're not really responding to that thing, you're responding to something that triggered that you experienced years ago. So a lot of times when you're talking to people and they're having this extreme reaction, they're not really reacting to what's happening. They're being triggered and responding to something that happened a while ago. So a lot of us are walking around just responding to past events. Mental health and taking care of your mental health helps you become aware of that. So mental health is just aware of your thoughts, aware of how you're coping with everyday life and how you're coping with things that are stressful. So how do you approach your own mental health is something that I really want you to become conscious about and what you can become aware of. So put your questions so I can deal with those at the end of our time together. And what are your concerns with mental health? What do you question? What are some things that maybe you want to know about as it relates to mental health? And what do you feel is kind of difficult to approach when it comes to maybe talking to someone else about mental health? I do want to know what your concerns are. Okay, so the good news about all of this, especially in the work environment, is that you really don't have to solve the mental health problem. If you do, let me know. I want to partner with you, and we're gonna go on circuit and we're gonna sell it. Okay, we're gonna package it and sell it. So you don't have to solve the mental health problem. You only have to provide a supportive environment as it relates to mental health. I know it's intimidating to think about that, but providing a supportive environment is really important as it relates to making sure we're all on one accord, that we're all in understanding and same understanding as it relates to mental health. How do we do that? Fidelity, being faithful, making sure that your employees understand that they're trusted and that they can trust you, that we call that a mutual trust, that there is a give on both sides. There's reciprocity. I trust you in this space to make sure that you're doing your work with fidelity and you're doing what you're supposed to do and you're showing up. And then I can be trusted because I am your support. I'm here for what you need. If you need to talk, I'm here. Whatever resources that you need, I'm here for you. So fidelity is really important. Mutual trust is important. Policy is also important. Having something written down that you can hand to someone to say, this is how we are going to best support you as it relates to your mental health. Okay, so having something that somebody can read, something that they can go by is really important. And supportive language as it relates to mental health. When it comes to supportive language, educating yourself as it relates to mental health, educate yourself on depression, anxiety. What are the symptoms? What are the signs of depression? What are the signs that somebody's about to be in burnout? Educate yourself when it comes to that. Signs of burnout: they're not coming to work, they're calling in, they're not staying long, they're getting sick, they're not showing up, their productivity is low, they're not as engaged, they are talking amongst themselves about things that are happening or some common complaints. So make sure that you understand that that is kind of this thing about burnout. And after burnout, there's a lot of absenteeism. We talked about that before, but they just kind of stop coming, they're calling in, things like that. And then you can have a more supportive language, like we're here for you. What do you need? How can I best support you? I know you're tired. What can we do to help you feel more supportive in that environment that you're in? And I know in this industry, there's a lot of client worker interaction outside of you. So a lot of things are happening in the home. And having more supportive conversations regarding that. What makes you uncomfortable? What do you need to be comfortable in an environment? Or just instruction. This is how to have a conversation. This is how to best support the people, the families that you're working with. This is how to best support the environment that you're in. Giving people language, because remember, we're an individualism kind of place. And so many people come to work as an individual, not understanding that there is an experience that they're giving. But most individuals think that I am having an experience. So having the language of, you are also giving an experience. So what does your experience look like? I always say, listen, you know what it is to be you. You don't know the experience of you. It's really important to make sure that you understand the experience of you, and each individual worker is the experience that they're giving to your families. So having those kinds of conversations, the supportive language around that. Also, just a couple of ideas that when I think of how to best support your people that you're working with, know your leadership style. Know how you're coming across. Are you more authoritative kind of leader? Which means you're really not the expert. The people that you're working with are the expert, but you gather everybody to come to a common goal. You're the person that's orchestrating everything. Authoritative also is the leader is not, I wrote that down, like I can correct that and give that to you. But there's authoritarian. Authoritarian leader is more manageable, rapid decisions that are needed. They're the expert in the room. So it seems as though the authoritarian tells everybody what to do. The authoritative just kind of manages the process of what needs to happen. Coaching, helping employees grow to learn, focuses on long-term personal development, as well as job-related skills. Are you coercive? Do what I tell you right now. This usually works if we're trying to overhaul something. Everybody needs to do what they're told. Are you democratic? Input on the decision-making? Are you leading by example? And that's the pace setting, high expectation and quick results. You really need to know what leadership style is needed where you are in your capacity to get the most intimate connection and have a better relationship with the people who you are interacting with as far as who's working with you. So know your own personal leadership style. Then there's coercive. Do what I tell you to do right now. Democratic, I said that, pace setting. Lead by example. Okay, so when it comes to everybody working together and managing mental health, you have to have some kind of information settings. I cannot sessions. I cannot say that more. There has to be a common knowledge and common understanding around mental health. And the only way to do that is have brown bag trainings. Let's get together for lunch. Let's talk about mental health. This is some common mental health issues in this field. These are some things that we commonly see. And if you have these issues going on, please let us know. And then we talk about the language around mental health, that supportive language. We're here if you need us. Come to us if you need anything. And when we talk about that supportive information set, is during that time you can say, listen, when it comes to fidelity and this trusting relationship, we have to make sure that our families know that they can depend on us. So if you go and you're talking about mental health issues with the family, it lessens that integrity, right? So we want to make sure that they're always really comfortable with you being in that home. So let us take care of that with you. And then we can help access help if you need help. But as far as integrity and trust and fidelity, we just need to make sure that our families are confident in our care. So all of that can happen in trainings and information sessions. Always have resources. You don't have to solve it. Have a resource, have pamphlets, have a helpline. Give them a list of something that they can look at. And it can just be, Generation Z, they want websites, they don't want paper. So some kind of social platform you can have. I do have work with organizations that have group text or a social platform, they can go and check and see what's going on, and kind of can put their own little postings. I know some use Band, some use GroupMe, things like that, that they can kind of keep in contact and say, hey, this is what's going on. Hey, several texts throughout the day. Hey, we're thinking about you. If you need us, you're having a hard day, give us a call. We're here to help you. Something that's immediate. Gen Z needs immediate several times a day. They're on their phone several times a day. So it's good to contact several times a day to give some kind of reinforcement, some kind of support to them. And also provide some kind of safe space for them, right? Whatever that is, whether it's your office, whether it's a place where they can come. I've helped, organizations get like a safe rooms where they can go in, they can meditate, it's quiet, it smells great, they can come in and they can sleep, they can do whatever, take a break. But even if that's not something that is feasible where you are, but just having something that they can kind of refer to, that safe space could be a website, it could be an app, a Calm app, something like that, that you can say, hey, if you're feeling a certain type of way, here is a resource that you can go to. Generation Z and millennials need resources. They need reminders, things like that. So to best support them is to have a reminder every day at 10 o'clock. We're going to have, you send out a reminder, hey, have a great day. Every day, every time at 12 o'clock, make sure you're taking care of yourself. Make sure you're eating your lunch or whatever you need to do. But make sure you have a constant kind of connection with them through technology. Okay. The thing about mental health that I really want you guys to get is how it has changed over 70 something years. And that when you are speaking to another generation about mental health, you're having two different conversations. So when they walk away, you need to make sure that even through an information session or brainstorming or however you approach it, that everybody is on the same page as it relates to expectations. Okay, because the framework is different and how they see the world is different. So because of the vast amount of differences, make sure that you are very clear about expectations and everybody is on the same page as it relates to resources, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. But because mental health is so, it's kind of user reported, right? So I can tell you I have depression, and because of my framework, what you see may be different. You say, girl, you are not depressed. You just need to get some sleep or just come to work or something like that. So having that understanding, know that there are two different frameworks that are talking, right? So always get an understanding before you walk away when it comes to mental health. Also, as it relates to mental health, it is actually take care of your own. Lastly, take care of your own mental health. Do your own self check-ins. And when I say do your own self check-ins, that means listen to your own self-talk. How do I feel? What do I need? What am I saying to myself during the course of the day? Why am I so frustrated today? Am I frustrated by the activity of the day, or I'm frustrated about what happened last week? So know your own self-talk, take care of yourselves with your own mental health, and get help. I'm always going to say go to counseling. Always. That's what I do. Always have someone to talk to that can provide a safe space for you to talk and can kind of go through how your own personal self feels. Okay. But it's just really important that you yourself are dealing with your own mental health, because if you're not, you're projecting onto everybody else, and we can't deal with that. We can't fix that for you, but only you can deal with your own mental health. So make sure you're taking care of your own. That's it with the presentation, because I really want you to give me some of your questions, and hopefully I can cover some of that for you. And that is my information that you can contact me.
Perfect. So we got some questions coming in. We also have some that were previously submitted. So I'll start with one and then we'll hit the ones in the Q&A. So one was submitted that said a client called us to say that her employee is guilty of absenteeism, and the employee is gone 2 to 5 days a month, unplanned, not scheduled. But when we spoke with the client is saying that they think this is anxiety related, that the nanny has high responses to things. So for example, the child was ill, and the child wanted their parent more than the nanny. The nanny was so upset they had to send her home for the day. Her phone broke at work. It bothered her so much they had to send her home for the day. So they said, how do they address this directly with the family to help without it being more negatively received because she's already so easily upset? And how could you best assist the nanny in a situation like this?
Well, I think assistant and nanny is probably one of the first, first priorities as far as giving some kind of tools in dealing with anxiety and asking what are they needing in that environment, and just really talk about more information on parent-child relationships, bonding and things like that. That kids will always prefer their parents. And that is a healthy response. So more education as it relates to parent-child relationships and dealing with that action is considered rejection. So a lot of people have a high or very intense response to a feeling of rejection. So giving more information as it relates to what exactly is the rejection and what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. So that's more of an education thing. And then just asking, when you're in that moment, what are you thinking? How are you feeling at the time? Also, comforting that family and just talking to them, same thing, rejection. Everybody is feeling rejection in that moment. And educating family as far as rejection and what the responsibility of the nanny is, and where they can impact and what they can and what they're needing at the time. What do you need at the time, right? And what conversations and how they can talk to the nanny about the importance of them being there and how they are, how they impact family as far as being supportive, how we look forward to you being here and how you are needed in our home and how we appreciate you being in a home, those positive things, so the nanny can feel more embraced by that family. But
is there a better way to address someone that is not saying that they have anxiety? How could you even bring that up in a way that does not seem abrasive or like assumption driven?
By questions. Ask a lot of questions. How do you feel when this happens? What happens in your body? Does your heart rate, do you start to sweat? Does your heart rate increase? Do you start to sweat? Do you feel nervous? Do you want to just get up and run away? Ask a lot of questions and say, oh man, that just sounds so hard. It sounds like you're dealing with just being anxious in that situation. And that's really hard. I can understand why you would feel that way in that situation. You don't have to, it's not a diagnosis. It's really affirming how they feel and saying, I really can understand why you feel that way. Now that you've explained it that way, I can understand why you would feel that way in that moment. But let's talk about other ways of dealing with that. You don't have to feel that way if you understood that they're trying to be accepting and they want you a part of that space. So
wonderful.
Yeah,
that's really great. I love it. Jamie is saying we've seen more nannies quit their nanny jobs with families due to mental health issues and concerns this year, more than ever before, even more than during the pandemic. The nannies are not our employees, but they do have a direct effect on our businesses. How would you talk to nanny candidates during the interview or onboarding process about balancing mental health and burnout and professionalism?
Man, that's a great question, because the easiest thing to do is ask them. Just ask the question, how do you manage your mental health? How do you deal when you are stressed out? What are some of the things that you do when you're stressed out? What are some tools that you have in place that you can use? Because being a nanny sometimes can be stressful. How do you handle stress? Or have you ever, what happens if you feel overwhelmed? What do you have a support system that you call? Being a nanny means you have to have a support system outside of, of the home. So what support system do you have in place? Making sure they have a support system, but asking a lot of questions. You don't have to ask, probing questions like, when you're anxious, what do you do? You can say, when you feel anxious, do you have a support system in place? It's really important that you that. How can we best support you in making sure that you have a lot of these things in place?
That's really great. That's some great insight. I hope that answered your question, Jamie. We had another one that was submitted that said, if an employee takes a leave of absence, so for over 30 days and then returns, a leave of absence could mean something as minimal that she was overworked, she was overwhelmed, she was stressed, she just needed some rest, or it could have meant that she was hospitalized, she tried to commit suicide, she could be hurting herself. How do we assess that before sending them back into homes with families, is there a way to protect employees while advocating for families?
Man, that's hard because you have the American Disabilities Act, you
Right.
have OSHA, you have Family Medical Leave Act, you have all those laws as it relates. And according to HIPAA, you really can't ask those specific questions
Mm-hmm.
because it is covered and they don't have to say that to you. But
Mm-hmm.
what you can have conversations around support systems. What can we put, how can we best support you? What do you need to have in place? Here are 3 things that you can do if you get overworked and stressed out.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a number that you can call immediately. If you feel like you can't, you can remove yourself and call this number or let us know. Text this to us. We are here for you in whatever capacity. And usually that kind of language, we talked about that before, having that mutual trust. If they feel safe in that aspect, then they're more willing to discuss what those symptoms are when they start feeling overworked or whatever, and they'll give you a little bit more information about what they're dealing with. And it's just providing a safe environment so they can inform you of what the things that they're dealing with.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's really
More
good.
trust.
Jamie is also submitting, do you have any ideas on how to coach clients on having conversations around mental health with their employees?
Ask that question again.
Do you have any advice on how to coach clients on how to have conversations around mental health with their employees?
One way is just like we said, just have some kind of gathering that's fun and something that is very informal and giving a lot more language to mental health and destigmatizing mental health and just giving more language about what it means and symptoms of different mental health issues. But just giving people language and destigmatizing it is probably the best way to go.
Perfect. Someone submitted that they struggle dealing with anxiety around extremely rude or aggressive clients. Do you have any advice on how I should handle that, or should I just commit to not servicing those types of individuals for my own mental health?
A lot of clients who are high conflict, that takes a lot of counseling and a lot of talking for them not to be high conflict. So that is not a problem that you can solve just by having a conversation with them. So you do have to decide within yourself if that is a client you want to continue to work with. If they present as high conflict, they will continue to be high conflict. If that is the first thing that they present, you can guarantee that we will always come into some kind of conflict. So if you were triggered by that, it is my recommendation that you probably should shy away from that. But if you go ahead and make that decision, know what your triggers are, and have your own plan of de-escalating or getting your own self out of that situation. But the responsibility of change, the response is up to the client to change, and you can't make them do that. But the responsibility to make sure that you're safe is yours. So you can make the decision to be a part of that relationship or not. If you are part of that, just make sure you have your own sense of safety and resources available to yourself.
Perfect. Another question was submitted. Do you have any ideas for busy working moms to help them manage and improve their own mental health?
Oh, yes. One, you can't be 100% of the time. And that's the thing. I think busy moms have this thing that I have to be 100% every single space that I go, and giving busy moms the permission to say you can't be 100% of the time, and giving them language of it's okay that all 10 things on your list aren't done, but just having conversations about what their definitions of success and productivity are, and give them different definitions of what productivity is, what definitions of being there for your kids, and what a successful mother looks like. Have different definitions for them, because they're on a one-tracked thing. Everything has to go well. Everything has to be perfect. And no one can live up to that kind of standard. So giving them other options of the different language around productivity and success, and then giving them some permissions, giving themselves permission to just be okay and just not have anything on the day, and it's okay to take some time off, and your kids will be fine. You know?
Listen, I hope y'all heard that message. Take some time off.
Yes.
It was also submitted, how can we help mitigate the flighty use of mental health diagnoses within our organization? For example, a person having a single hard moment stating that they are depressed, or someone who does have highs and lows in a single day stating that they have bipolar. How can we better educate around these diagnoses so that we have, let me see here. Anyways, I can't see the rest of this question. I feel like I can just getting what they're meaning. So basically, how can they communicate that so they can adequately advocate for them and believe what they're saying, and that person actually knows like the weightiness of what they're saying. I would expect, given this question, oftentimes in an organization, you would have individuals for whom they do have clinical anxiety or they do have clinically diagnosed depression. And so to have other individuals around them throwing these terms out as they are self-diagnosing themselves may make them feel like what I'm experiencing is either not as severe as I think it is, because clearly everybody is bipolar, or it may make them feel like someone is not taking them seriously. And so how can we help to educate them a little bit better on what you said earlier, I guess, on the fact that these are clinical diagnoses and we can have these experiences, but the actual diagnoses could be different. How can we do that so that we can advocate for them and maintain better trust overall?
I think giving more language, giving more
Mhm.
words that they can use. You can, there's a major depression diagnosis, and you can be depressed. You can't have every
Mhm.
day, and giving more language around what that means, right? So just more education as far as definition of the actual diagnosis, and then we say things like, I'm depressing today. I'm responding, that made me depressed. So I'm depressing today. I have a sense of anxiety. I don't feel well. I'm kind of nervous. Just giving more
Mhm.
language, supportive language around that, and educating them about being supportive and being great advocates for the people around them and being sensitive to the people around them. Just giving a lot more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wonderful. In what ways can we support the qualities of resilience on our team? We don't want them to have to push through every storm in that type of work culture, but we also don't want them to cry over a splinter either. So in what ways can we cultivate resilience, empathy, and grit within our team?
Well, I think you have to kind of set you have to set the pace, right?
Mhm.
So one, through education, right? And so give people information about what's
Yeah.
hard about the situation. Give them information about what's hard, what kind of obstacles that you may face during working here, some own personal struggles that you may have, and then let them have an understanding about what may go on with them. So if people are aware that they may have something, that they're more likely to reach out, more likely
Mhm.
to identify that, and maybe ask for help. If you don't give them that information, then they will think of it as severe, and they will take off or disappear.
Mhm.
But if you just give them language around what is to be expected, what's normal in this work environment, and this is how we have addressed these issues, so that
Yeah.
can lead to some great resilience. Yes.
That's really, really great. Kim submitted a question that said, how do you find the balance between, on the similar lines, between supporting the mental health of your caregivers and employees and actually having them work and not be sucked into our culture of mental health days to the extreme? There's so many, like the younger generation, or not being able to cope with conflict or hard things.
Have a place for them to go.
Mm.
You just have to have a place for them to go, whether it is someone that they can talk to, or hey, if you have this problem, this is how we're going to address it. But they need somewhere to go. If
Yes.
sometimes, because they're so immediate individualism, we talked about that before, and it's
Mhm.
just about them, they will emote and do whatever they need in the moment. But if they have somewhere to go, they can say, oh, let me go talk to so-and-so because I'm having this kind of moment. Give them
Mhm.
somewhere to go. Give them a resource, not just a flyer. Give them somewhere to go, someone that they can talk to, somewhere that they can debrief an incident that happened, because sometimes they are
Yeah.
stimulated, overwhelmed by something that's happened in the home. So
Yeah.
give them a place where they can go and debrief and talk about how they feel, that's safe and secure, and has the language, that supportive language that I mentioned earlier. They need a place to go.
Really great. Jamie has a follow up with that. How can we do that? Do we refer them to a therapist? Do we have someone on our team that is allocated for that? How can we best do that?
The best way to do that is you can go through a therapist. I actually contract with one of the nonprofits in Dallas, and I just go in, and once a month I may see about 10 people, and and I go in and see clients that way. I did a lot of that before the pandemic, not as much now because everything's virtual, but you know, you can contract with a therapist, or you can have somebody on your team that can be a crisis and interventionist that comes in and can kind of debrief, talk to them about what's going on, and then send them out into the community to get counseling. But I always say counseling needs to be one of the resources, just because people need a place to talk. And that can
Yes.
help. Yes.
How can you help to cultivate grit?
Ooh, that's a tough one because
Yeah.
our younger ones don't like that. They don't like it's
Yeah.
hard, like things being hard. I think having a discussion as far as kind of what balance looks like and how do they get balanced, and when you feel balanced, and when you discuss about balance, then you can go to the extremes. When are you most feeling the most challenged? You can have that conversation the most challenging, what is most challenging to you, and then
Yeah.
provide tools in that space that they're in. So if you give them tools when they feel like they're challenged, they can use those same tools when they feel even more challenged, right? And so a lot of times, if you just talk about where they are, because they're individual, a lot of individualisms. If you just discuss with them what's hard and give them the tools in that space and kind of train them in their own space of hard, it teaches them that when something else is hard that comes on that may be harder, they already have the tools. So it's more education around conflict, mediation, hard conversations, more conversation around those things.
So you've talked a lot about asking a lot of questions. Are there any questions that you would specifically ask, like references for nannies, that would help you to identify individuals who may have erratic behavior, or other things that may show up in the workspace?
Yes. One question asked, like, you can ask questions like, what do you do? How do you cope with anxiety? What are some of the things done? Like, when are you most anxious? You know, when was the last time you felt kind of out of control, where you couldn't kind of control when the environment wasn't controllable? What did you do yourself when the environment around you wasn't controllable? Right? Some personal questions about themselves. What was the hardest thing that you've ever done? Have you ever not done something because it was too hard? Have you ever walked away from something, and do you regret walking away from that? You know, what would you have done differently now that you know better, that you're not in that situation? What would you have done differently? What have you learned in your life about facing hard things?
Yeah, that's really great. Did y'all take notes? Listen, I hope you're taking notes. Those are some really good questions to add to our repertoire of questions for recruitment and onboarding. I don't know about you all, but I'm leaving here today feeling extremely informed and well educated on this subject. I definitely feel motivated to ask different questions, ask the right questions, so that we can get more informative answers. Definitely, as you know, education is my jam. So definitely motivated to continue the process of educating the nannies that we represent. So like Dr. Chandra, or Ms. Chandra said, that our nannies can have a place to go. Y'all, we got to give them somewhere to go. We can't just, they're running away because they have nowhere to go. So I am very committed, as I'm sure many of these agency owners are today, to find a place for them to go, to give them direction, to make sure they have a contact, to make sure that they have resources. And on the subject of resources, Ms. Shundria is always a resource. She's giving you her contact information at the end of the slide. We will send it back out when we send out our resource packs and a replay of this discussion. Feel free to share it with your team and with your admin team and the individuals that will be dealing and working directly with the nannies and the employees that you're sending out, so that we can all be better informed, and we can all ask the right types of questions, and we can all help to support the mental health of the individuals that we've chosen to represent in our community. I'm so motivated. I'm super geeked about it. As you know, APNA is committed to collaboration, education, and growth. We hope to see you again next month as we continue to grow and learn. And we thank you all so much. And we thank you so much, Ms. Shundria, for your time and your expertise and your information, and for pouring into us today. And we thank each and every one of you who took the time to join us today. We hope to see you again in the next month. And we hope that you continue to learn, grow, and collaborate. Thank you so much, everyone.